In the early 1800s, the young United States was caught in the crossfire of total economic warfare between Napoleonic France and the British Empire. Britain escalated the tension in 1807 by issuing the Orders in Council. This decree dictated that any neutral American merchant ship bound for a European port was subject to immediate search and seizure by the Royal Navy. But the British went beyond searching cargo. Desperate for manpower to fight Napoleon, the Royal Navy actively intercepted American ships to kidnap sailors and force them into British service, a practice known as impressment. This tension exploded in June 1807 during the Chesapeake Leopard affair. A British warship fired on an unprepared American frigate off the coast of Virginia, killing 3 Americans and abducting 4 suspected deserters. To the American public, these maritime abuses proved that Great Britain still viewed the United States as a subordinate colonial possession rather than a sovereign equal. Hoping to avoid bloodshed, President Thomas Jefferson implemented the Embargo Act of 1807. He intended to use peaceful economic retaliation to starve Britain of American goods. The plan backfired completely. Instead of crippling the British economy, the embargo froze American international trade, bankrupting domestic merchants and leaving goods rotting in warehouses. The catastrophic failure of economic coercion proved that peaceful negotiations were useless. American leaders realized that only military force could command British respect. While the oceans boiled, a second front was erupting in the West. By 1811, rapid American pioneer expansion was pushing indigenous nations off their ancestral lands. In response, the brilliant Shawnee leader Tecumseh worked to forge a massive, unified Native American Confederacy. His goal was to draw a hard line and halt pioneer advancement once and for all. The American forces decided to hit first. In November 1811, they launched a preemptive strike on the Confederacy's capital at Prophetstown, resulting in a bloody skirmish known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. As the smoke cleared, American troops searching the fallen warriors made a startling discovery. They found British-supplied weapons. The discovery of British arms at Tippecanoe linked the two fronts in the American mind. Britain was now actively funding a proxy war in the American interior. Back in Washington, a new, aggressive generation of politicians took control of Congress in 1811. Led by figures like Henry Clay, they became known as the War Hawks. They demanded a military confrontation to vindicate national honor, put an end to frontier raids, and potentially conquer British Canada to permanently remove the threat. By the spring of 1812, the War Hawks had cornered President James Madison. Through relentless political pressure, they forced the cautious president into preparing a formal war message. By securing key committee chairs, the War Hawks seized control of the legislative agenda. They systematically transformed decades of diplomatic friction into a direct military ultimatum. But then, the timeline fractured. On May 11, 1812, an assassin shot and killed Spencer Perceval, the only prime minister in British history to be murdered in office. His death threw the government in London into complete paralysis. Unaware of the chaos across the Atlantic, President Madison delivered his formal war message to Congress on June 1st. He cited both naval impressment and the frontier violence as primary justifications for combat. Meanwhile, the newly reformed British government, desperate to avoid another war, made a massive concession. On June 16th, they announced the repeal of the restrictive orders in council. This timeline tracks 1812's information flow. The top axis is London, the bottom Washington. Without telegraphs, news only traveled as fast as the wind. On June 18th, the U.S. declared war, committing to combat completely unaware Britain had already offered peace. The War of 1812 was ignited by a perfect storm of maritime kidnapping, frontier bloodshed, and political pressure from the War Hawks. But the final trigger was a tragic communication delay, launching a war just days after America's primary demand had already been met.